Ready.
Oh, welcome back, Sports Underground. Sorry about the length of that last segment. We're going to go into a little bit of Wild and Wolves talk right now. We just talked about the Harmon Killebrew passing. Wild also with some bad news in the family this week. The passing of Derek Boogaard at the age of 28, awfully young to die. And you tell me that there was some updates on the reasoning to that.
According to what I've seen, it's been a mix of prescription medications and alcohol. Obviously, 28 years old is too young to pass away, and obviously there's got to be some sort of issues. But I think you mentioned the link between the fighting and the head trauma and the hockey career. Linking all those things together, mixing them all together, do we have a prescription for early death, and is it going to become more prevalent in NHL and maybe in NFL and contact sports altogether?
Another thing with Boogaard too, not the most talented hockey player you're ever going to put. He obviously known for his fighting. The only reason he was there. Struggled this year, a lot of injuries. Might have played 24, 25 games all year.
Yeah.
So I'm sure a little bit of depression. You know, the NHL moving away from fighting. Is a guy like that think his career is coming to an end because of, you know, not a need for a goon per se in the league anymore? Maybe that played into it a little bit too.
Possibly, but he's at the pinnacle of what he needs to do. He's the best at it. Changed teams, changed cities this year. Got a new contract, a little bigger contract. Maybe a little more pressure on the guy than he had here in Minnesota to perform. Didn't perform last year, like you mentioned. Got injured. Sat out a majority of the year. Did, however, score at least one goal.
The first one I can remember him ever scoring.
So, you know, things were changing for him as a young man too, and I think he's getting a little more mature and maybe coping with those type of stresses and dealing with those type of differences.
Right.
Maybe caught up to him.
And not trying to make light of his passing by any means, but kind of a sad state of the Wild affairs when Derek Boogaard, who, you know, by NHL standards, not a great NHL player, great fighter, he's one of the top 5 most popular Wild in their history. That kind of tells you the lack of quality hockey players we've had through here when him and Wes Walz, Andrew Brunette, they're 3 of your top 5. Now Gaborik on the high end being obviously the most popular Wild of all time. Brian Rolston, Mikko Koivu also in that conversation. But not a lot of great talent in our best players we've had through here.
No, and the team is getting so stale. It's getting so old. Another thing that we mentioned in the last segment, I mentioned how the Twins were so cute. They had a really good little team for a while, going along and winning their division and not going anywhere else. Kind of same thing with the Wild. They've been cute for a while. They've been competitive for a little while, but now we got this streak of 3 years not being in the playoffs, not really going anywhere, not really gaining talent, but maybe losing it with Gaborik leaving, losing some core depth, losing our coach.
Twice.
Yeah, twice, yeah. No, I was thinking of Lemaire when I said when we lost our coach.
Right.
But wholesale changes in a team that is not young anymore. It's not in its infancy. It's not an expansion team anymore. We got to start getting some results and seeing some dividends being paid with drafting.
Well, they've failed with their top draft picks a lot over the last 10 years.
A.J. Thielen.
That would be the highlight of the blown draft picks.
Colton Gillies.
Colton Gillies starting to play a little better in the minors now, but still not anywhere near what you need him to be.
No, when we did draft in the top 5 to 15, we need to get an impact player in here that can score some goals, and we failed to do that.
Benoit Pouliot.
Exactly.
That guy's gone. Now, Latan Dressy comes back, you think maybe you got a little bit of value for him.
Maybe, but the jury's still out on him, too.
Right.
Is he the guy that's going to pump in 30 to 40 goals, or is it the guy that's going to have a one year and done where he's pumping in 15 to 20?
Right, and maybe not playing half the year. Is his drive to that kind of thing. And we're talking about when Riseborough took over, we did get Gaborik, Pierre-Marc Bouchard, Mikko Koivu, Brent Burns. We had a nice run of picks, and then when we do come back and get Nick Leddy, who by all accounts was going to be a pretty good pro, we end up trading him away. And now he plays for the soon not to be defending Stanley Cup champions, but if he can play for the Blackhawks, maybe a guy we should have kept on the team, and the guy you traded for, Cam Barker, hardly saw the ice this year.
You can crack the lineup on Chicago Blackhawks as a 19-year-old or 20-year-old hockey player. You're pretty good,
and it makes you a star on our team because we have 3 guys that could probably play for the Blackhawks at this point.
Exactly, and they probably wouldn't be first-line players for sure.
Right.
But the guy we got back, Cam Barker, on paper, it kind of makes sense. You can look at it and be like, Cam Barker
We got rid of a
came from here.
huge contract in Kim Johnson.
Exactly.
But Johnson's the joke, folks.
He was expiring anyway.
Right.
That was going away anyway.
Right.
I don't get the money this team spends. I don't get the amount that it spends up to the salary cap every year for not getting any results, and it's getting really, really sickening.
Well, you look at the Detroits now; they're getting old and maybe not the best example, but I'm talking about talent on a team versus salary cap. Detroit, San Jose, Vancouver,
Washington, Philadelphia, even Buffalo. How about Buffalo? They're a fun team to watch.
Right, and we have the same amount of money spent. We have no Ovechkin. We have no Semin. We have Nicholas Backstrom. Not the good Nicholas Backstrom. We have the goalie. You know, look at the team, whether it be Vancouver, whether it be Washington, and there's 3 or 4 superstars to very, very good players. We have a very good player and a couple of good players.
And the fans are starting to take notice, and they're starting to voice it a little bit more, not only verbally, but we lost the sellout streak this year. That's no longer intact.
Well, this will tell you how quiet it is on the Wild front. The NHL draft is going to be in St. Paul this year. I've heard maybe 10 seconds talk about that. Also, we don't have a head coach.
No.
And once a week in the paper, we get a mention that we're still looking for a coach. Chuck Fletcher, you talk about Kevin McHale being the ostrich with his head in the sand. I haven't heard, seen, or anything of Chuck Fletcher for the last 2 weeks.
And I think I'm okay with that. Really, because at least he's not making moves.
Right.
But you're right. The NHL draft isn't nearly what the other drafts are. We mentioned before the NFL and the NBA draft are probably the top 2 drafts that probably mean the most about impact players right away. But the NHL and the baseball draft, your players are not going to be here for 2, 3, maybe even 5 years, unless you hit on that one guy that is an 18-year-old. He's so far better and superior than what you have in your team now that he's got to start.
But the Wild losing their sellout streak, like you said, you would think that they'd be pushing a little bit of just something to get some interest back in hockey, because like interest is at an all-time low. Not North Star low, but for the Wild, they can't live off the we're back, we got a new arena, best arena ever. You need to start producing on the ice.
And I said they missed out on some of their free agents too. I think we've got everything we're going to get out of Pierre-Marc Bouchard. Nick Backstrom isn't going to get any better. I always say Nick Backstrom is a closing pitcher on a bad team. You don't need a good goaltender on a bad team because it doesn't make any sense. If you have a good closer on a terrible team, why is there a need to save games?
Well, and Jose Theodore was a good enough goalie last year. You could have moved Backstrom, got rid of some cap, and I know I've said this before about talking about the Vikings. I don't really care what you would have got for the guy.
No.
But unloading that cap space, you still have a good goalie. It looks like Hackett in the minor leagues, who's the Houston Aeros, the minor league affiliate, made it to the Western Conference
and it may
finals
not
be of the AHL. And he may not be Backstrom good, but what's the difference? Is it this? Is it this? Is it this? On a losing team, does that much difference really matter?
I say a couple things. Yeah, one, it may not be what you get back for the guy, but it frees up your options in the future. Maybe not right away, but next year, say, instead of paying $6.5 million, we're paying $3 or $3.5. That frees up $3 million to go pursue this guy, and we're getting the same level. 2 things I say: you can find a running back in the NFL. You can find a goaltender in the NHL.
Right.
You can find one that is serviceable, and when you're not a very good team to begin with, find one that's serviceable that doesn't cost $6 million. You'll be fine. Trust me.
Well, when you talk about him being against the cap, looking at ways to make moves, not a lot of people to move. You could move Backstrom. You could move Brent Burns. You could probably get something for Cal Clutterbuck, but not probably enough to make it worth losing. Not that he's the greatest hockey player. Settle down, Wild fans. He's not the greatest hockey player that's ever laced them up. I know a lot of you believe he is. He makes some nice hits. Congratulations. Mikko Koivu, obviously not going to move him after making a big contract signing. And then, of course, the bad sign of Marty Havlat. I like Marty Havlat. I've seen some flashes from him.
But I don't like Marty Havlat at the price.
For $7 million a year, you better give me 30 goals and 40 to 50 assists.
And I think an interesting guy I brought up a second ago was Pierre-Marc Bouchard. We've got everything we can out of him. It's time to move that guy and cut our ties. He's not going to get any better. We're not going to get any more points out of him. We're not going to get any more goals out of him. He's a nice player, but he's a player that's got to feed the puck to other players, and I don't think we have...
And we don't have the sniper to let him feed the puck. You have Ovechkin on that line with him, he's going to get you 80 assists. He's going to get Ovechkin in the right spot to make the right play. But having a playmaker without the ender, without the closer, the scorer, It
we don't
really
have
doesn't
we don't
make
have
much
the
sense.
structure for that guy. We don't have
Right.
the structure for him. But put him on Tampa Bay, put him on Dallas.
Right.
It makes that team instantly better.
Andrew Burnett's contract's up. There's a guy that heart and soul the Wild for a lot of years, the first time he was here and coming back the second time, but probably at the end of his rope. And do you want to stick $3 million into a guy who's going to give you 15 goals and a lot of locker room presence? I don't think so.
Probably not, but if you do stick $3 million into him, at least maybe you can be an announcer or something like that, where you can do less damage and maybe spend 5 or 6 years being